Hello everyone, Ana Carolina here. Today I'll be showing you how to create this fun motion reactive feedback effect in Metaspark. And in the process, we'll go over camera texture and camera segmentations, the scene render passes, and the delay frame patch. So let's get started. Okay, here I am on my empty project. And the first thing I want to give you is a little disclaimer. So at the moment I'm recording this tutorial, the latest version of Metaspark out is version 162. Um, However, I'm having a lot of difficulties previewing the feedback in there. If you're working on 162 and you're having that same issue, just make sure you keep restarting the scene over and over again. Otherwise, you can do what I decided to do finally, and it's working in 161. So that's it. Let's get started. So I just want to start as always bringing my assets from outside. On this case, and for this project in particular, I only have one single asset. Everything else is procedurally generated inside the effect. So that's going to be pretty fun. And the first thing that I want to generate is actually my camera texture. And the camera texture allows me to use when my camera is seen, the camera feed as a texture for anything, like a regular texture on a material. So if I come here and I select my camera, right here on the properties panel, I have the first option to create a texture extraction. If I hit the plus sign, you can see it created a camera texture. It shows it in here, but also if I come here to my assets panel, it shows up on the available textures. And so let's just see this in action very quickly, just to make sure it's what I'm saying is true. So if I come here and add a plane, and I'm gonna create very quickly a material that I'm gonna attach to this plane. I come here to this material and on the texture section, I select camera texture one. I can see my texture. It looks a little bit like dark, but it's because I'm using a standard material, meaning it receives lights and shadows. So I'm just gonna change it to flat. And just like that, it looks better. It looks more like it's supposed to look. It is also a little bit squished, and that's because the aspect ratio of my camera texture and the aspect ratio of my plane are not the same. So it's squishing it. So a solution would be to either change the size of the plane or getting a 3D object that has the proper UV mapping to use the proper camera texture and like avoiding the squishiness or the stretchiness. So that's a thing that I could do. I'm not going to do it right now because this is just a demonstration. So no need to go all the way there. The other thing that I want to do with my camera texture is that I actually want to isolate my subject from the background. And to do that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use a technique called segmentation, which is basically a computer vision algorithm that detects specific parts of the scene and creates a pixel mask around them. So it is used to separate objects like the person or the hair from the background. And depending of the software you're using, you have different segmentations. On Metaspark, you have person, hair, and skin. On TikTok, Effect House, and then Studio for Snapchat, you have things like hand segmentation or sky segmentation. And in Snapchat in particular, you can create your own machine learning models for segmentation. So it is a very cool tool. In this case, what we're going to use is the person segmentation. I can either create it by coming here to my assets panel, hitting plus, textures, segmentation textures, selecting person, or I can come to my camera and here on segmentation, hit plus and say person. So if I come here and I have my person segmentation, I'm just gonna rename these things actually to be a bit like more organized because otherwise it gets kind of confusing. I mean, I'm only have one segmentation, so it's not that big of a deal, but I'm just gonna organize it. If I come in here to my material zero and I select on my camera texture my person segmentation and I reload, as you can see, this is just a mask. That's exactly what it is. It's nothing else. So what I do on the way that I use segmentation, and everybody does it, is basically you select camera texture here, and then you come here and add alpha. And in the texture on the alpha, where you select your camera segmentation. So it's basically just like a alpha that is multiply your image. What is cool too is that right now that I haven't done anything to my person segmentation, I can come in here and actually make some changes to my mask size, to the softness of it, everything. It's kind of hard to see in here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm actually going to delete this and I'm going to create very quickly a canvas and a couple of rectangles, one for my persona and one for the background. and I'm going to stretch them to fit the screen as I always do. And I'm going to select my rectangle one, which is the one that is lower, meaning it's the latest one on being rendered. And I'm going to add here the material 0. So here it's easier for me to see what's happening with my segmentation texture, isn't it? So I just come here and I can be like, hey, okay, so let's actually make this edge a little bit less soft. I want a harsher. And in this case, I want my mask size a little bit tighter so I don't have this like white halo around my persona when I'm like doing the effect, the feedback. So I'm just gonna keep it like that for now. And I'm gonna leave this as it is right now. I'm going to turn off the rectangle 0 because I don't need it. And another quick thing that I want to do is I want to add a face tracker. And I want to add a face tracker for two reasons. The first one is because I'm going to use it eventually and I want this out of my canvas. It keeps grading there. Just make sure it's under your camera. And I want to add a sphere. And I can, instead of bringing a sphere from outside, I can come in here to my AR library of Metaspark, find on 3D shapes and say, hey, give me a high res sphere. And I can just drop my high res sphere under my face tracker, and here it is. And if you notice, my sphere is getting kind of cut off for some reason. And let me put this so it's obvious, more obvious what's happening, that is getting cut off. And the reason why that's happening is because we talked about this earlier, because what's happening right now is that my canvas, even though it's supposed to be like a 2D object, it has a 3D space position that is colliding with my sphere. So to fix that, as I always do, I just come here to my advanced render options, turn off depth test, and right to depth. And just like that, my sphere can be behind or front, it doesn't matter. Right now is on front, in front of everything, because these 2D images are not considered things that are living on the 3D space. And so I'm just gonna move this sphere a little bit up just to have it in here. And I'm gonna move to the next stage. The thing that I want you to notice before we move forward is that I have in here, if I come to my actual viewport, I have my canvas. If I turn this off, I go back to this like washed out version of what's happening. This is my camera. This is actually what my camera is seeing. This is what my scene camera texture is. This is my addition of that scene camera texture into my scene as a object, as a texture on a 3D object that is being rendered. And that's the reason why they look differently. If you notice, and this is important on the next stage where we're about to do. So what I want to do now is that I just want to come here, come to my patch editor to show you something. And if I come in here at the very top of my scene, I have my device. So if I come in here and render pass and I hit this, it says no signal because there's absolutely nothing connected to my screen output right now. This is what my screen would see. If I do something like a value very quickly, I say, hey, let's add a value. Let's make this a color. So it is something that you and I can understand as humans. And I plug it in here. All I see is orange because that's literally all I'm telling my device to see. If I delete here and I come here to default pipeline, right here is still properties, render output, render pass, default pipeline, create. What I get is the default pipeline that it actually uses to create a sense of the scene. What is so cool about this is that it gives you full understanding of how it's processing what you're doing, A, but B, it gives you so much power. So if we come in here, we have the scene render pass. Everything in here is pretty standard. The sizing mode is the screen, so it's selecting whatever the screen is and it's adapting things to that. But what is so interesting is that we have the scene object, and this scene object is everything that is under this object called device, and we have the background. If I remove the background, as you can see, the only thing that I have left is the things that exist under my scene, meaning this canvas with my segmentation and my sphere. If, on the other hand, instead of using my device, I use this high resolution sphere as an object, like I come in here and I drop this object in here, boop, I selected. What I did is I selected the object, hold it, drag it, and release it. And I take this object output and plug it on my scene object. The only thing that I have is my sphere because it's the only object that I actually am rendering. So when I'm seeing like device inside a seeing object, what I am seeing is everything that's happening on their device. What is cool about this is that this background is actually a 2D, like it's an image. You're seeing it like what it's reading is an image, and the output is as well an image. And so I can have a set of render passes where I'm rendering an object, I'm doing something between this node and the next node, and then inserting that on the background. So, very quickly, just to show you how quickly you can modify something with a render pass, is that I can connect this to here. I can come here and say, hey, color, let's make this a cool green. I plug this to my sync output, immediately everything has that. So what is cool about this too is that I can make this fully procedural. Right now, this result, I could have a screen image on top of everything and have a color in there to make it one thing or the other. But what is so cool about this is that actually this allows me to make this procedural at all times. And so that's like a very cool thing about render passes. And this same logic actually is the one we're going to use for creating our feedback effect. And to do that feedback effect, we actually use something called delay frame node. I'm going to come and create here my delay frame. And I have my delay frame node. It's a pretty standard node, except if you notice, it doesn't have an output. It does have, however, this little like speaker, and this speaker, what it indicates is that this frame, that this node is a sender node. We haven't talked about senders or receivers before, so this is a good moment to talk about them. And so, what a sender is basically something that sends information. So I can create a sender. It doesn't have to be only the delay frame. I can create a sender in any given moment. I can create, for example, a bool sender, and I can create a receiver somewhere else, and I'm just going to create a value so we can read whatever my receiver is receiving very easily. And I'm going to say, hey, receiver, what you're listening is my sender called sender. If I come here to the sender and I turn on my bool, it changes to one. If I turn it off, it changes to zero. And so basically, what a sender is a node that sends something to someone else, meaning a receiver that reads it. In this case, I want actually this to read the delay frame. And if you remember in TouchDesigner, the secret of the feedback is actually having things getting back to the feedback node. Like you always have to call back a previous stop. And that's basically what we have to do on the same case. We are creating the delay here. We are sending it back to this delay frame. We're doing whatever things we want to do, and then we bring it back. So I'm gonna just build a very quick like setup to show you this working. Um, so what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna plug this in here very quickly. And I'm gonna create a shader render pass. And what a shader render pass does is that it creates a texture out of all this. And I'm gonna connect this into render pass. And remember, when things go through this delay node, they already are having their feedback happening. So actually the way that I move past the feedback is not through here, but it's actually in here. Because whatever this thing is here is seeing, it was already sent back here. So if I come in here, I'm gonna change this to 1 and I put this in here, absolutely nothing changes. I mean, except that I lost my sphere, and we'll talk about it in a second. But if, for example, I start saying, hey, zero point 0.5, I start seeing the delay happening. Or if I say something like zero point 0.1, the delay is even more evident because I'm mixing my camera texture that is real time with my delay frame texture. So I'm having this like motion blur. So this is a very quick way of creating a motion blur if you ever want to do that. So that's basically quickly what it is. Uh, but if you notice, like I miss, like I'm not seeing my sphere, and the reason because that's happening is because I am connecting my camera texture directly to here. I'm not connecting the actual everything, so it's not seeing everything that it could be seeing. If, on the other hand, I connect my send render pass with the mix, now I'm also having this sphere into my actual delay. And the reason for that is because now I'm seeing not only the background, but I'm seeing the whole thing. If I turn this off and I only do this, and I come here zero point 0.1, Same thing. I'm only seeing whatever is on their device, but I'm not seeing the camera texture. So let's get back to our process. Let's try to get the feedback that we want. And to do that, what I want to do is I don't want to use this mix. I'm going to turn off this mix for now. Whoop. And this is off because nothing is connected to my device. Or because right now the delay is just seeing itself and there's nothing in it. Isn't it like it's absolutely dark? So there's nothing to see. But what I want to do is instead of using my camera texture, my device, as my camera texture as the background, I want to use whatever my delay frame is using as the background. And I want to use whatever the combination of my delay frame and my async object together as my render path. So now I start having this thing that is looking kind of interesting. So I start having my first delay, my first feedback. But important thing, if I leave this device in here, I'm actually missing as a point because if you notice, my actual delay frame has one extra level before coming into here. Right now, we won't see it. We'll see it like later. You would notice this breaking. Right now, you won't notice it. But I'm gonna plug it because I know it will break eventually. You know, so basically, you want to connect with the last node that was connected to the delay frame, unless you have something in mind. In that case, yeah, go for it. So I have my general structure built, and that's totally fine. And what is so cool about this is like now you have your first feedback built. The next thing that I want to do is that in my effect, what was happening, the fact that we are building today is that we were having like the seeing like growing up, like the feedback growing out. So what we want to do is that we want to add actually a transform. Isn't it? We just want to do that. So I'm just gonna add a texture transform. And my texture transform, to transform it, I connect my texture, I connect my output. I have to use something called uh 2D transform pack. So I'm just gonna say 2D transform pack. Here it is. That allows me to change this. And so right now the scale is 1 1, nothing is happening. But if I change this very slightly to 1.1, all of a sudden we immediately have a thing that looks way more interesting. Or I can leave this on 1, but I could move this on 20%. So I start having this cool rotation happening on my image. Or I could just move it up a point and the other direction a point, and I'm gonna make this 0. Well, maybe that's too much because remember that translations on Metaspark are minimal. But yes, you get the idea. What I want to do though is that I want to make sure that the scale of my delay it's affected based on the position or like the amount of movement that's happening on the head, isn't it? That's what's happening on the effect we're building. Like whenever you move the head, there's like a little bit of like, oh, if I'm moving the head a lot, there's a lot of movement. If I'm moving the head a little, there's not that much movement. And the way that I would do that is that I will use my face tracker, thinking about it, use my face tracker and creating a little delay as well that allows me to know what is the difference of change between moment 1 and moment 2 and what is the distance between those moments, and using that, if it's greater than, then I'm doing this, if it's not, then I'm doing something else. So let's go and build this. I'm going to bring my face tracker, and what I did is that I selected my face tracker, I drop it in here. And now that I have my face tracker, what I can do is that I can use my 2D position, my 3D position, sorry, and my 3D rotation. So I'm just gonna get a value out so I can see whatever is happening, isn't it? Because otherwise I don't know. I'm just gonna bring a value out and I'm gonna make this a vector 3 so I can see, because remember this is XYZ, so it's a vector 3 always, and the rotation. The rotation seems to be having okay numbers, but it seems like my translation is just so minimal. These numbers are not going to be very useful. So what I'm going to start by doing is multiplying my translation, and I'm going to multiply everything again, vector 3. I'm going to multiply everything by 100. And if I come here and add another value, and I'm not going to have that many values all the time, but just so I can see it right now, yes, these values are more useful. I'm going above 0, so I actually can use this somehow. But if you notice, some of these values are becoming negative here and there. And what I want to do is that I want to compare the difference between uh I want to find the maximum value in a given moment and compare it with the maximum value of the moment right before. So if I have negative values, that is going to skew my data set. The way that I'm going to change this is that I'm going to make everything absolute, meaning everything is going to be always a positive number. So I'm just going to add an absolute here. I'm going to copy it and paste, and I'm going to add it in here. And I haven't had to do any of this multiplication with my rotation because my rotation actually has like numbers that like feel more usable. So I'm just going to leave it as it is. And then the other thing that I want to do is that I want to use a maximum. And what it's going to do is that it's going to find the highest number of any one of the three values of the vector, the three parts of the vector in any given moment. And that's what it's going to give me. So if in a moment, what I'm doing is that I'm moving position X more, but rotation Y more, what I'm going to see is position X, rotation Y, and see also whatever is happening at a higher, with higher intensity. And then what I want to do here is that I want to get my value so I can check it. And let me see what I have. And it seems good. Seems like they are all positive. Just wanted to make sure of that. But the other thing that I want to do is that I want to add a delay because I want to read this value as well, but a little bit behind. I'm going to use a zero point 0.1 second because if I make this value too big, what's going to happen is that it's always going to be a big difference. So I'm just trying not that big of a difference for now. Let's see how where this takes us. And if it takes us to a good place, we can leave it like that. And then what I want to do is that I want to add a distance node. And the distance node is that it's going to calculate the distance between two moments. Right now, it's a problem because I connected this as a number. It's a vector 3, but now I did this, and now it's a vector 3, so there's no problem anymore. Again, I'm going to move this out of the way so I can continue. And I want to have a value here again so I can like track whatever is happening. Just going to add a value. Again, I'm going to make it a vector 3. And here I have my value. And it seems like the values go from 0 to around 10, 7, 8. Let's say 0 to 10. So what I can do now is that I can use a from range. And what a from range is going to do is that it's going to take all these values and it's going to turn them from whatever they are to 0 to 1, which is a range that is easy for me to control and predict. And I can now use whatever is coming out of here easily somewhere else. So I'm just gonna value this to be able to read it and make sure that actually what I did makes sense, that I'm not getting super tiny values again. I'm just gonna see vector 3, and it seems like 0, yes. And very once in a while, there's a hit of zero point 0.9. Excellent. So these are like cool values. I'm gonna use them. What I want to do now is that I want to swizzle. And again, this is the way that I'm doing this. Doesn't mean that it's the only way you could find that value. What I'm going to do with this swizzle though is that I'm gonna tell it, hey, tell me what is the bigger value in XYZ, and let's use that as a driver. So we're picking the biggest value between rotation and translation in any given moment. And now we're gonna select the biggest value on XYZ of that combination of maximum. Because yeah, I don't care about specifics actually. So I'm just gonna do it like this. If you want to do something more specific, we could do one where it's like, okay, I'm just wanna use the rotation, and we just do that. But in this case, I'm just gonna say, hey, just take the X and the Y and the C and find the maximum because I can always do maximum between two values. So maximum between X and Y and whatever that said, and maximum between whatever X and Y is, and compare these to C. And so I'm gonna again give myself some space. So the next thing that I want to do now that I did this is I'm gonna have one value, which is what I want. And this value, I hope, moves anywhere between 0 and 1. So it seems like, yeah, it seems to be looking on those range. Yeah, zero point 0.9, almost there. And so last time we were talking about the from range and to range, but we also talk about the transition node. And instead of using a to range, because I could like do this to like make the number go from when it's 0, make it be on 1, and when it's 1, make it be 1.1. What I'm going to do is that I want to use a transition. And the reason why I want to use a transition is because it allows me to control the way the value is interpolated. Because it could be linear, but also it could be sinusoidal. So I'm going to do for now sinusoidal in and out. I'm going to say, hey, Whenever we are on zero, give me a 0.001 for now. And whenever it is one, give me a 1.3 for now. And actually, now I'm too far from my end result. I'm just gonna drag this and then I'll organize this. I promise. I'm just gonna pack here. And remember, pack allows me to create a vector. In this case, I want to create a vector too with the two same values because remember, my I want my scale to scale at the same level. And if I connect this in here, what's happening is that when I'm not moving the head or where my uh, user is not moving their head, it's very little movement. And when they're moving the head, it's like bigger. And I can actually fine tune this. I could make it like, oh, there's always a very slight amount of movement. And then what happens that when you're moving your head, it gets like more extreme, you know? I'm gonna keep it like in here. So there's like a very little movement always happening, and then something more extreme whenever you move your head more. And so that's it. The last thing that I have to do, the last thing that I would like to do is actually adding the color of the rainbow. That's the the reason why I broke this texture. So as we were talking earlier, the cool thing of this is that you can start like mixing textures, like multiplying directly textures into other textures. And I can do the exact same thing at these moments. So what I could do is that I can come in here, I can add my rainbow, sorry, my my purple blue purple gradient, select it, drag it. And now that I have this, I could do two things. I could do the easy option, which is like literally just multiply. Like I'm just taking this color and I'm multiplying it, and there's nothing else happening in here. And if I connect this to shader, that's it. I have color. I didn't have to do anything else. But I could also, if I wanted, do something like again a 2D transform pack. And what I can do now is that I can create a loop like we talked last time. I can create a transition and I'm going to do it on rotation actually. Transition. And I want it to go I want it to be a number. And I want it to go from 0 to 360. And I actually want it to be looping. So like that, it's going to be always changing a little bit. I'm just going to turn on my loop and I'm going to make this 5 seconds. So it's like a bit slower. And just like that, I have my color feedback. The last thing I want to show you before we finish this project is like, do you remember that I told you earlier you can control your person segmentation in the options? But now I come here to person segmentation. I'm like, where are my options? My options are no longer here because I've been modifying all these things throughout this time. Uh, I can no longer find my personal segmentation options. So the way that I can go back, like maybe I finished my project and I was like, okay, I like it, but actually I am feeling icky about this segmentation. I want to do some changes. I can come here, select my personal segmentation, and just like I created a render pass patch, I can create a render pass for my personal segmentation. So if I come here, personal segmentation, and I select here and render pipeline, create a render pipeline, I can do that. So I have my personal segmentation here and I could connect this anywhere on the project. Remember, this is a mask that I could use to multiply values. In this case, what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna literally just take my camera texture that I already have. I'm gonna drop it in here. And I'm just gonna like multiply the value that I have between my camera texture or the value of my person segmentation. And I'm gonna use that value in my material zero for my texture. I'm just gonna drop it in here, connect it in here, and I'm gonna turn off this alpha. And again, I have control. Like I can do the same thing that I was doing there. I can control the softness. Maybe I realize that I want something more edgy, something that feels more graphical. I can totally do that. Or maybe I can do again, go back to have something soft. Or I can like change the expansion of my mask. All those things are possible. It's just that because now I added my render pass, like my scene render pass pipeline, I have to make those changes down here on a segmentation render pass pipeline as well. But again, it's the same options, just like on a different place. Just like an important note in case you like do it and then you want to make some changes, you can always make them. You just have to do them now here this time. But yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And yeah, let me know in the comments if there's anything else you want to see. If there's anything that this tutorial spark, maybe you want to do. Oh, one last thing I want to do. I actually want to turn off this sphere because there's no single reason to have it anymore. That was just for demonstration. It came out along the right. But yes, this is it. Okay. Thank you so much. See you next time.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you're serious about taking your TouchDesigner and interactive skills to the next level, I highly recommend you check out the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro. It's the only educational resource and community of its kind for TouchDesigner and interactive professionals. You can learn more by checking out the link in the description. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and the little bell icon for more awesome free content.